The year is 2010. It's the height of Twilight mania and paranormal romances are being churned out like hotcakes. And into this ring steps a new contender. Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 1 and Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 2. At a slim 64 pages each, it makes you wonder why they weren't just compiled into one volume. But I think we all know the answer to that. It starts with C and ends with apitalism, and much like a vampire, it is an evil and seemingly immortal presence in society. That being said, a slight correction, these books aren't about the evil kind of vampires. No, they're about the hot kind of vampires. There's a new boy in town, states the back cover, but is he human or vampire? These books are part of the Nancy Drew The New Case Files graphic novel series, which is completely different from the Nancy Drew Girl Detective graphic novel series, which is completely different from the Nancy Drew Diaries graphic novel series, which is completely different from the Nancy Drew and the Clue Crew graphic novel series. All these series do have something in common, however. I believe they are the only Nancy Drew series not officially authored by Carolyn Keene. Instead, they are a partnership between writer Stefan Petruccia and artist Sho Murase, along with the occasional collaborator. Such is the case for Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Parts 1 and 2, for which they are joined by writer Sarah Kinney, who also happens to be Stefan Petruccia's wife. So if this isn't the most romantic paranormal romance of all time, I don't know what is. In an interview from October 2009 with Stefan Petruccia and Sarah Kinney, they explained why none of the Nancy Drew graphic novels are attributed to Carolyn Keene. First of all, the publisher was licensing the rights to Nancy Drew from Simon & Schuster, so there wasn't a long history to tie them down to certain traditions. Additionally, it was argued that the folks who've written the Nancy Drew movies and the TV series in the 70s were always credited, so therefore the creators of the graphic novels should also be credited, I suppose alluding to the fact that graphic novels are a unique medium. The art style in these books is very interesting. You can definitely tell it was influenced by Japanese manga while not completely following that style. The backgrounds are quite simple and often appear to be composites of 3D renderings or photographs. The character designs have a sketchy look, featuring a lot of stark lines resembling pencil marks, giving them a semi-unfinished feeling. To be honest, I'm not quite sure if I like it or not, but it's definitely distinctive. And they actually got Nancy's reddish blonde hair right, which is more than you can say for a lot of Nancy Drew cover artists. These books were published by Paper Cuts with a Z, which was founded in 2005. In fact, the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys graphic novels were launch titles for the company, and their next publication was a graphic novel edition of the life of Pope John Paul II. Paper Cuts still exists and continues to publish graphic novels for children based on licensed properties, such as the Smurfs, Winx Club, and a bunch of Disney IPs. Although nowadays all evidence of Nancy Drew and Pope John Paul II appear to have been scrubbed from the Paper Cuts site. What don't they want us to know? Let's find out. Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 1 starts very abruptly. That's me, Nancy Drew, girl detective. The one with the crossbow and the attitude. Nancy's two most distinguishing traits, of course. However, she is quick to reassure us that the crossbow is fake, so there's an immediate letdown from the promise set up by the title. Which is a complete misnomer, by the way, just to set your expectations early. There are no real vampires in these books, nor does Nancy attempt to slay anyone. She does slay, though. Nancy is accompanying her friends Bess and George to see the hit movie Twilight. That's D-I-E L-I-T-E, spelled like a diet beverage, not a source of illumination. They are all wearing costumes as apparently they get discounted tickets for dressing up. For Nancy and Bess, this means wearing fairly normal, if more floaty outfits, and for George means wearing full werewolf drag, complete with goatee and beard. Just so you know why George is dressed like that. The trio are taking a shortcut through a graveyard when suddenly they find themselves being chased by a vampire. However, it's quickly revealed that he's not chasing them, but running away from Nancy's dog, Togo. These books are all about subverting tropes, which is established from the very beginning. This isn't your typical vampire. He is a coward. He is scared of small terriers. At the theater, we quickly learn that Nancy is not a twihard, or diehard, I guess. She thinks vampires are so passé and, frankly, uninteresting. I kind of got over the whole vampire thing after I read Dracula in the 5th grade. I don't know, the whole blood-sucking thing just didn't appeal. An odd choice to make, considering that the audience for this book is presumably fans of vampire media. So, strange to make your main character someone who is explicitly not a fan of vampire media. Nancy notices a person wearing a cloak sitting in the back of the theater, which she thinks is strange. Pretty rich coming from a girl also wearing a cloak and sitting in the theater. After leaving the movie, the three girls formally meet the vampire from earlier. Good evening. I am Gregor Coffson. Gregor Coffson. Gregor Coffson. Gregor Coffson. I can't emphasize this enough. His name is Gregor Coffson. Then they run into someone who sucks even more than the vampires in Twilight. Nancy's boyfriend, Ned Nickerson. Ned! That's my name. Thought I'd try to catch you after the show. Sorry I didn't come, but I really don't like to dress up in costumes. It makes everyone look so silly. God forbid people get a little whimsy out of life. Much like a vampire, Ned drains all the life out of any room he enters. Then we get a more welcome cameo, Deirdre Shannon, Nancy's supposed rival who is actually secretly in love with her. It's canon to me. Deirdre tells Gregor that Nancy's a detective and he perks up. You're a detective? That's fascinating. I'd love to talk to you about that. Perhaps over dinner or a movie? Or dinner and a movie? Thanks, I'm flattered, but I already have a boyfriend. So, hi, I'm boyfriend? Ned. Oh. Because every self-respecting paranormal romance from 2010 needs a love triangle. But Nancy does end up meeting Gregor for coffee the next day at dusk. He tells Nancy that he needs help, but won't say why right away. Which means of course Nancy needs to go on a few more dates with him. Is Nancy dating a vampire now? She's seen him every day for a week. In the midst of this, Deirdre texts Ned a picture of Nancy and Gregor together in an attempt to make him jealous. It works. Op. How do I pronounce that? Op. It's her and that Gregor. I have to admit, I like it better when her mysteries don't involve other guys. I don't like when Nancy talks to any man who isn't me. Remind me again why I'm supposed to like Ned? Because I'm struggling over here. By this point, Bess and George are fully convinced Gregor Coffson is a real vampire, by the way. His name is Gregor Coffson. What more evidence do you need? If vampires aren't real, why are there so many books about them? So they decide to take the reasonable, normal next step, break into his house while he's out on a date with Nancy to look for definitive proof that he's a vampire, and they talk Ned into joining them. They easily enter the house because Gregor left a window open, although it's covered by thick curtains. Strike one against Gregor Coffson. Everyone knows vampires don't like sunlight. They then discover that his fridge is entirely full of jars of a red liquid that looks suspiciously like blood. Strike two. And strike three? He has a coffin sitting in the middle of his living room. Can't wait to see Gregor Coffson try to explain that one. However, right after this, Nancy and Gregor return, so Bess, George, and Ned are forced to hide behind the curtains. Gregor's like, hey Nancy, can I get you a drink? Some of my homemade vegetable juice, perhaps? Vegetable juice, actually, with some iron and vitamins. Make it myself. I can't trust store brands. Too many additives. I have a condition, and one of the symptoms is that I crave salty liquids. Want one? Conveniently, this conversation happens out of earshot of Bess, George, and Ned. Gregor's condition is called erythropoietic porphyria, which apparently has been historically confused with vampirism. One of the symptoms is acute photosensitivity, which is why he has to avoid the light. And how is it you explain the coffin in your parlor? Oh, says Gregor, it was left by the last tenant. And Nancy's like, oh, of course, the evil stage magician who used to live here. Of course! Then Gregor finally reveals his secret. He has a stalker who is convinced Gregor is a real vampire. Little does Gregor know that he actually has 3 additional stalkers who believe that he is a real vampire, all 3 of whom are in his house right now. They've sent threatening notes, warning of their plans to destroy me. Bad enough when the notes are texted or sent through email, but when they arrive by letter, that meant the stalker knew where I lived. The letters have followed me to 3 towns so far, all over the country. I love this panel. The haunting computer windows. It's art. Meanwhile, Bess, George, and Ned decide to act. There is no vampire, it's silly. All that stuff we found must have some explanation. I think we should go too. Go? Then what did I bring these for? Gregor tasks Nancy with finding and stopping his stalker. He also tells her that he set up an elaborate security system in his house. Cue a farcical sequence in which Nancy's friends are ensnared by Gregor's traps one by one. It's up to me to save Nancy now. I'll scream, scare him with the hammer and stake, then run like crazy. The hardest thing to install was the trap door, but it's my favorite. Bess is so bought into the Gregor is a vampire theory that she is about to kill him in cold blood with an actual stake through the heart. More like Bess Marvin Vampire Slayer. Gregor and Nancy are like, weird, what was all that noise just now? And discover Nancy's trapped friends. Gregor is upset, thinking that Nancy sent her friends to spy on him, but Nancy protests that she didn't know and implores Gregor to trust her. I promise nothing like this will happen again. Let me prove it. Let me be your friend and help you. Ned, despite being locked up in a cage like a monkey at the zoo, prioritizes being possessive in this moment instead of, I don't know, literally anything else? Hey, would you mind, not touching him on the shoulder like that? I say leave him in there a little bit longer, like maybe a week. Feed him a couple unsalted peanuts through the bars. I think it would do him good. Nancy asks Bess, George, and Ned to leave, and as they exit, the cloaked figure Nancy saw at the movie sneaks in and tampers with the security system, causing the house to go into lockdown, metal shutters slamming down over every door and window, effectively trapping Nancy and Gregor inside, and Bess, George, and Ned outside. But it's not just Nancy and Gregor trapped inside. It's Nancy, Gregor, and Gregor's homicidal stalker. Yes, vampire, your blood-sucking days are over. Now, at last, I will destroy you. And that's where part 1 ends. Before we move on though, I want to take a peek into the back of the book where Paper Cuts advertises their upcoming publications. There's a 2-page spread. On the left page, The Hardy Boys Undercover Brothers, the new case files, crawling with zombies. And on the right page, Classics Illustrated graphic novel number 6, The Scarlet Letter. The vast contrast between these two books is wild. The pairing could only be more incongruous if the right page was advertising the graphical biography of Pope John Paul II. Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 2 picks up right where Part 1 left off, with this Buffy cosplayer threatening Gregor with a crucifix and wooden stake. Nancy's like, no, you're making a mistake! I'm pausing for laughter. Nancy goes on to say that Gregor isn't a vampire, he just has a chronic illness. To which the stalker rebukes that actually Gregor is a vampire. She knows this because he is from her home village in the Carpathian Mountains, where he lived 100 years ago before he was run out of town by an angry mob wielding pitchforks and torches. You know, your classic angry mob. Popular media has led me to believe that the only use for pitchforks back in the olden times was for waving as part of an angry mob, which again I am led to believe was a common occurrence. Gregor admits that he does come from the Carpathian Mountains and was adopted as a child, but that was 18 years ago, not 100. Then he faints. Outside, Bess, George, and Ned, after having a moment of doubt, are once again totally convinced that Gregor is a real vampire and that he is going to suck Nancy's blood. Therefore, they need to hurry up and rescue her. So how's the laptop going to stop Nancy becoming a slave of the undead? It can't get her out of there. The answer? George simply hacks into Gregor's security system. It takes her like 2 minutes. So they're able to see what is going on inside the house, albeit without sound. Looks like she's doing just fine. The way Ned shoves George out of the way, I know you think your girlfriend is shacking up with an immortal vampire, but that's inexcusable. What's really happening is that the unconscious Gregor is passed out against Nancy, making it look like they're embracing. This book contrasts people thinking that Gregor is a vampire, due to his prominent coffin, jars of red liquid, etc., with Ned thinking that Nancy is cheating with Gregor, due to her being friendly towards him. The message is that appearances can be deceiving, and not to judge a book by its cover. For instance, the covers of these books say Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer on them, directly contradicting the actual story, which is more like Nancy Drew Guy who everyone thinks is a vampire protector. Stop! To hurt Gregor, You'll have to get past me. I've had to get tough with criminals before, but this was different. She was on a mission from God. From God! A mission from God! Gregor's like, wow, Nancy, you're so brave, and it's all for me. And Nancy's like, oh, well, it's nothing really. Gregor had very little experience with women, and I suspected he'd been nursing a crush on me. So Gregor isn't a vampire. He's something even scarier. An incel. Then Gregor throws a jar of his homemade trad wife vegetable juice at the stalker, knocking her out. He and Nancy carry her onto the couch. She's so light, so small. Yeah, not the physique you expect to see on a vampire slayer. In fact, if it weren't so silly for so many reasons, I'd say that she looks like a vampire. Of course, Bess, George, and Ned see all this without audio, so they think they're all covered in blood and start freaking out. Having eyes on the inside is important. For all we know, that's a crime scene. That's Chief McGinnis, by the way. He's here too. An evil crime scene. Gregor may have killed that woman. Or maybe he's turned her. Oh god, what if they're both vampires now and are going to feast on... Or what if he's turned Nancy? What if she's a... Whap! Back inside the vampire mansion, we get some more lore about Gregor's past, which is when it becomes immediately obvious where all this is going. Gregor was adopted when he was 5, after his birth mother couldn't afford health care for Gregor and his twin sister Garina, also diagnosed with erythropoietic porphyria. Also, everyone in their home village thought they were real vampires and tried to stone them to death. Now, things would still be shrouded in a little bit of mystery, just the tiniest wisp, if the writers hadn't accidentally had Nancy call the stalker Garina 10 pages ago. So even though Nancy and Gregor act like they don't know the stalker's identity, it's already inadvertently been revealed to the reader. Although, even without that typo, I still think it would be pretty obvious, especially because on the very next page, Nancy suggests that the stalker looks a lot like Gregor, almost like she's his twin or something. Unfortunately, they turn their backs on Garina for a minute, only for her to immediately disappear and then show up again wielding a giant sword. Another one of those things the evil stage magician who used to own the mansion just had lying around the house. You should have killed me when you had the chance. But Nancy, putting the pieces together, calls Garina by name, which causes Garina to become unsure and back off, just as George manages to hack into Gregor's security system and lift all the shutters. Bess, George, Ned, and Chief McGinnis all rush inside. Chief McGinnis escorts Garina off the premises, while Nancy and Ned have a romantic reunion. They're about to kiss when they're interrupted by Gregor bursting out of the coffin in the middle of the room. Just his cute idea of a hiding place. Don't read too much into it. Nancy wants to tell Gregor about Garina. I have to tell Gregor something very important. Could you guys give us some time alone? Really? You just spent the entire night together. You'd think you'd said it all. So Ned, Bess, and George go wait outside. Nancy tells Gregor about Garina being his long-lost sister, and he responds, I can't believe this. You're like some bright angel in my dark world, Nancy Drew. Sorry. That line is so 2010s paranormal romance, it hurts. But like, in a good way. Then Gregor kisses Nancy, and of course this is the moment Ned chooses to glance over at the security footage still playing on George's laptop. And naturally, he doesn't see Nancy push Gregor away moments later. By the time Nancy comes outside, Ned is gone. We have just over 1 page left. Just enough time for everything to be neatly wrapped in a bow, right? Well, Gregor called me once after that, just to tell me that Garina's psychiatrist suspected she'd been brainwashed. It would have been easy to do. Garina was already delusional, with her porphyria so untreated. Taking a lot of pain medication made her mind more susceptible to hallucinations. Okay, hold on. So many things to unpack from just 4 sentences. Garina was brainwashed? By who? With what motive? Were they using Garina as like a hitman to kill Gregor, but instead of a hitman, she was some kind of sleeper agent brainwashed into thinking she was a vampire slayer? And why Garina? If you want to kill Gregor, there are a billion easier ways than brainwashing his long-lost sister into thinking she's a vampire slayer with divine purpose? Did the mastermind behind this ludicrous plan just enjoy the cosmic joke of it all? And is that true? Pain medications make your mind susceptible to hallucinations? Guess I gotta be careful next time I take Advil because my tummy hurts. Next moment I might start thinking I'm on a mission from God. Only one more page, and we'll get answers to all these questions, right? Those terrifying images of being frightened as a child may have made Garina transfer the fears of those who threatened her to Gregor, or someone coached her to believe those things and talk like a gothic horror character. The question was, who wanted to hurt Gregor? But it didn't matter. It didn't matter? It didn't matter? What do you mean it didn't matter? We're talking about the most elaborate assassination attempt in the history of mankind, and you say it didn't matter? Fuck. The only mystery I wanted to solve now was why Ned hadn't taken my calls for 3 days. I was hoping Bess and George would know. They sent me a pretty clear picture. I always knew that Deirdre would do anything to get Ned away from me, but I never thought I could do anything to make him interested in her. But I've been wrong. Once. Maybe even twice. I cannot believe Nancy cares more about her milquetoast boyfriend than solving the most devious mystery she has ever stumbled across. Also, Deirdre deserves better than this. And that is the end of Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 2. We're left with a bevy of unanswered questions. Like, for instance, are we actually supposed to like Ned in these books? That's one thing I can't understand. Because he comes off as incredibly unlikable, constantly acting jealous and possessive of Nancy, so insecure and weak-willed that he ghosts her, his longtime girlfriend, and immediately gets into a rebound relationship with her romantic rival, whom he doesn't even like. Granted, I don't like Ned at the best of times, but this is most definitely not the best of times. Poor Nancy, trapped between her insecure Redditor boyfriend and emo e-boy Gregor, who continually tries to push himself on Nancy, even after she has made it explicitly clear multiple times that she A, has a boyfriend, and B, is not interested in him that way. Wow. The romance of it all. Ultimately, I found Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Parts 1 and 2 to be, in a word, disappointing. Like, Nancy Drew meets Twilight, what a fun concept! But perhaps too good a concept, in the sense that a graphic novel from 2010, written within the narrow rules of the Nancy Drew universe by 2 writers who admit to not being big Nancy Drew fans, could never live up to that premise. Part 1 introduces a very dramatic setup, only for Part 2 to mainly be composed of 2 long conversations, one between the group inside the mansion, and the other between the group outside, who are mainly just learning things the reader already knows, like that Gregor has a stalker. Really wish they could have spent some of that page count instead explaining the whole Garina was brainwashed to murder Gregor by some unknown third party thing. The best thing that Part 2 gives us is Ned getting cucked by a vampire. Where Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer does shine is in its moments of comedy. I think we can all agree that our collective sense of humor is very different from what it was in 2010, when the funniest thing someone could think of was an annoying orange video or a picture captioned with impact font. But, much like an immortal vampire, the jokes in Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer have aged well. Most of the humor is interwoven with the sources of tension in the story, such as Ned's jealousy and Bess and George's theory that Gregor is a vampire, wringing the latent humor out of these tensions while also making the most of the dramatic irony that comes from the reader knowing the full story while the characters don't. The writing is quippy and clever, perfect for the fast-paced graphic novel format. But the story overall is lacking. I think it's clear from the fact that the vampire movie is called Twilight, literally the goofiest name for a fake Twilight, that Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer is intended to be a parody. But is it really? All it does is subvert some popular vampire tropes which predate both Twilight and Buffy in one of the most boring ways possible. Might as well have just said Gregor as low iron. It's not much of a mystery either, considering that the resolution relies on information the reader doesn't have for most of the story, as well as information that is just never revealed to the reader. Maybe there's a conclusion to this mystery in one of the later Nancy Drew the New Case Files graphic novels, but when I see a title that's broken up into 2 parts, I expect there to be a complete storyline within those 2 parts. I don't expect a resolution in some unknown installment further down the line. The innocent reader is led to believe that Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer is going to play on both Twilight and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but in reality it underutilizes both inspirations. It's like it's attempting to reheat Twilight and Buffy's nachos at the same time, but it's removed all the ingredients except the tortilla chips. We're left with a lukewarm take that doesn't even try to hit either mark. Much like that famous tool of all aspiring vampire slayers, garlic, Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 1 and Nancy Drew Vampire Slayer Part 2 kind of stink. And the sad thing is, they had the potential to be greater than the sum of their parts. Like delicious garlic bread, but they just aren't. I think that's enough vampire puns for one video. That last one kinda sucked. You can't tell, but I'm wearing my happy monster Halloween shirt. Look at how sick this is. Next moment, I might start thinking I'm on a mission from God. I can't say that with a straight face. Whap! 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 How do I even do these sound effects, man?